I was 11 years old the first time I saw the lights. We were out in the woods behind my grandparents' property, my dad, my older brother Evan, and me. It was one of those rare weekends when my dad wasn't working overtime and decided we needed fresh air and male bonding. We didn't have much of either back home in the suburbs. It was late October. The air was cold and sharp, and the trees were mostly bare, gnarled silhouettes against the early evening sky. We had a small fire going, and Evan was poking it with a stick while Dad sipped coffee from his thermos. I remember that I kept looking up at the stars. I've always been obsessed with the sky. That's when the lights appeared, three of them in perfect formation, hovering silently above the treetops. At first I thought they were stars, but they moved, slowly, methodically, as if watching us. No blinking, no sound. Dad stood up. I remember the way his thermos slipped from his hands and hit the ground, coffee hissing in the leaves. "What the hell?" he muttered. Evan whispered, "Are those helicopters?" They weren't. They didn't make a sound. No wind, no vibration. Just silence and light. And then, without warning, they shot upward, straight into the sky, so fast it was like they were never there. We didn't talk about it. Not that night. Not ever, really. On the ride home the next morning, Dad said it was probably military drones or weather balloons. Evan didn't say a word. I was the only one who couldn't forget. The lights came back. They always came back. Years passed, and I grew more obsessed. I read everything I could about UFOs, abductions, missing people. I joined forums, watched documentaries, followed obscure radio shows deep into the conspiracy rabbit hole. The patterns all led to the same conclusion. There was something out there, something watching, something that chooses. I started mapping sightings, pinning them to digital maps, looking for overlaps. One location came up again and again. Rathbone County, Oregon. It was a tiny, almost forgotten stretch of forested land near the Cascade foothills, a dead zone, no cell phone coverage, no nearby towns, and no record of anyone officially living there. But there were stories. I found them in handwritten letters, police reports that vanished from online archives, and a blurry photograph of a pale figure standing in a cornfield, eyes glowing like headlights. And the lights. Always the lights. When I was 27, I finally went back. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Evan. I just packed up my gear, cameras, satellite maps, night vision scopes, and an old CB radio, and drove out there on a cold October afternoon, exactly 16 years to the day since the first time I saw them. The road turned from pavement to gravel to dirt. Trees closed in around me like a corridor. At some point, my GPS froze, and the car's radio started spitting static. When I stepped out at the end of the trail, I could already feel it in my chest. That pressure. Like the air was thicker here, like the woods were holding their breath. I set up camp near a dried-up creek bed, no one else for miles. Just me, my equipment, and the stillness. That night, the lights returned. They didn't just hover this time. They moved, slow and smooth, sweeping across the treetops like searchlights. I filmed them, heart-pounding, every instinct telling me to run. But I didn't. I couldn't. I felt chosen. The camera started glitching. My flashlight flickered and died. And then I heard them. Footsteps. Not animals. Not human. Heavier. Deliberate. I turned and saw figures in the dark, 4 of them emerging from the tree line. Tall, spindly, featureless. Their eyes glowed, pale white like the lights above. And they weren't walking. They floated, inches above the ground. I ran. I don't remember how far. My feet tore through the underbrush. Branches whipped my face. I tripped, landed hard on the frozen ground, and looked back. They weren't following me. They were just standing there, watching. I made it back to camp and locked myself inside my car. Slept with a knife in my lap, engine running, headlights pointed into the woods. But the figures never came closer. By morning, they were gone. So were the lights. But that wasn't the end. Over the next 2 days, I kept seeing them. In the distance, in the shadows, between the trees. Always just far enough to doubt myself. Always just close enough to feel the fear. The lights came every night, and each time I heard more footsteps and voices, not words, whispers like thoughts that weren't mine. You were chosen. Come with us. Become. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, just watched, recorded, waited. I should have left, but I didn't. On the 5th night, something changed. The lights didn't come from above. They came from below. I was walking near the old creek bed, scanning the ground with a thermal camera. That's when I saw it. a circular depression in the earth, covered with moss and fallen branches, perfectly round, too perfect to be natural. I cleared it and found a hatch, metal, cold, old, no hinges, no handles, but it vibrated under my hands like something inside was breathing. I heard a sound, low, mechanical, like gears grinding in reverse, and the hatch opened by itself. A staircase led downward into pitch black. I stood at the edge for a long time. I should have run, but I didn't. The air down there was different, colder, sterile, like a place that hadn't seen the outside world in a long, long time. The walls were smooth, metallic, but not man-made. They curved like bone, pulsed like muscle. The further I went, the more wrong it felt, like the tunnel was alive. And then I heard them again. The voices, clearer now, not just in my head, whispering from the walls. Welcome, chosen, ascend through descent. I reached a chamber at the bottom, and I wasn't alone. There were others, people, lined up against the walls, standing motionless. Eyes open, glowing white, skin pale and waxy. Some looked half-finished, limbs too long, faces stretched, mouths frozen mid-scream. One of them looked like Evan, older, thinner. But it was him, and his eyes met mine, and he smiled. I ran. I climbed the stairs, slipping, gasping, hearing the voices rising behind me, not whispers now but screams, mechanical and organic, inhuman and furious. I burst into the woods and didn't stop running until I collapsed. The hatch was gone. The depression was just dirt and moss again. I drove back to the nearest town, slept in a gas station parking lot. When I woke up, the footage on my camera was gone. Every file, every photo, every recording. But the dream stayed, and I still see the lights. They're closer now, and I think they're inside me. They never found Jackson. When I stumbled back into town 2 days later, covered in mud, trembling, incoherent, I told them everything. The lights, the levitation, the noise like static and screaming mixed together. How Jackson had been pulled into the sky like a puppet without strings. But they didn't believe me. No one ever does. The rescue teams combed the forest for a week. They found my burned tent, some charred camera equipment, even Jackson's backpack lying untouched next to the ashes. But no blood. No signs of struggle, no footprints. He had simply vanished. They wrote it off as exposure, said we got lost, said Jackson wandered off, and I panicked. But I know what I saw. They didn't just take him. They showed me something. The moment the lights enveloped me, when I should have blacked out, I saw images, not memories, not dreams, visions, towering monoliths floating in the void, swirling colors that bent space. Entities, tall, thin, with no eyes or mouths, watching me, studying me. And in my head, a voice. It wasn't words, it was knowing, like an emotion wrapped in sound. A question asked directly into my mind, "Are you ready?" Then I woke up, miles from the campsite, alone. Since that night, things have changed. I have gaps in my memory. I lose time, seconds, minutes. I'll be staring at the wall, and suddenly it's dark outside. I wake up with geometric bruises, perfect circles, lines too straight to be accidental. Sometimes when I blink, I see shapes in the sky, glimmering silhouettes just above the clouds. And then there's the photo. 3 nights ago, someone slid an envelope under my door. No stamp, no address, just a single photograph inside. It was me, standing in the clearing, looking up, and in the photo, behind me, half hidden in the trees, was Jackson. Smiling, but not like himself. His smile was too wide, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, and his eyes, they glowed. I don't think he ever left. I think they brought him back, but he's not him anymore. And last night, I saw those same lights again. This time, they're not hovering, they're coming down,